Marcus Chun floated through the twisted corridors of the derelict ship, his helmet lights cutting through the darkness like twin swords. The vessel was ancient by human standards, maybe 2 centuries old, but the alien design suggested it was far older than that. Crystalline formations jutted from bulkheads that seemed to have been grown rather than built, and the air recyclers had long since failed, leaving only the sterile emptiness of vacuum. Another ghost ship, Marcus muttered into his comm, though no one was listening on the other end. His salvage vessel, the Lucky Strike, waited patiently 3 kilometers away, its automated systems monitoring his vital signs and ready to extract him if things went sideways. After 15 years of salvage work in the Outer Rim, Marcus had learned to talk to himself. It kept the mind sharp and the nerves steady. The ship's registry identified it as Keth Var Nem, which its translation software suggested meant something like swift wind in the old Zephyrian dialect. The Zephyrians had been one of the first alien species humanity encountered after developing faster-than-light travel, and their ships were prized by salvagers for their unique power cores and navigation systems. This one looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry, with personal effects scattered in several chambers and life support systems showing signs of emergency shutdown. Marcus pulled himself along a corridor lined with what looked like sleeping alcoves, each one designed for being roughly humanoid, but larger, with space for what might have been tails or additional limbs. His scanner detected no life signs, but that was expected. Ships didn't drift in dead space for decades with living crews aboard. That's when he heard it. A sound so faint his audio pickups almost missed it, filtered through the electromagnetic interference that plagued this sector. A rhythmic tapping like Morse code, but in no pattern he recognized. Marcus froze, checking his scanner again. Still nothing on life signs, but the tapping continued, coming from somewhere deeper in the ship. Following the sound led him through what appeared to be the ship's central hub, a vast chamber with a dome-shaped ceiling covered in constellation maps. The tapping grew stronger as he approached a sealed section that his scanner identified as the medical bay. The door bore symbols that his translation software couldn't parse, but the universal medical insignia was clear enough. Marcus attached his portable airlock to the door and began the careful process of cutting through the seal. The metal was some alloy he didn't recognize, harder than standard hull plating, but not impossible to breach with the right tools. As his plasma cutter worked, he noticed scratch marks around the door frame, deep gouges that looked fresh despite the ship's apparent age. The airlock cycled, and Marcus stepped into the medical bay. Emergency lighting flickered to life as his presence triggered ancient sensors, casting eerie shadows across equipment that seemed more art than science. Crystalline formations served as what might have been diagnostic beds, and walls lined with alcoves held containers of substances that glowed with their own inner light. The tapping had stopped. Marcus moved deeper into the bay, his scanner sweeping for any signs of what might have made the noise. Probably just thermal expansion in the ship's hull, or maybe debris shifting in the gravity fields of nearby asteroids. He'd investigate the medical equipment and then move on to the engineering sections where the real value lay. That's when he saw movement in the far corner. A shadow shifted behind one of the larger diagnostic beds, and Marcus felt his heart rate spike. His hand moved instinctively to the plasma torch at his belt, though he knew it would be useless as a weapon in its current configuration. The shadow moved again, and this time Marcus caught a glimpse of what looked like fur and the reflection of eyes. "Hello," Marcus called out, feeling somewhat foolish. His translation software would broadcast the greeting in several common languages, but if something was alive on this ship after all these years, communication might be the least of his problems. The response was a low whimper, barely audible but distinctly organic. Marcus moved closer, his helmet lights revealing more details. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. It was clearly an alien, but unlike any species Marcus had encountered in his travels. The being resembled a wolf, but scaled up to roughly human size and with an intelligence in its golden eyes that no earthly animal possessed. Its fur was a deep blue-black that seemed to shimmer with its own light, and its limbs were proportioned more like a human's than a quadruped's, though it was currently lying on its side. The alien's breathing was labored, and Marcus could see that its rear legs lay at unnatural angles. Paralyzed, his medical scanner confirmed when he ran a quick diagnostic. Some kind of spinal injury, possibly from the same incident that had left the ship drifting in space. "Easy there," Marcus said, keeping his voice low and calm. He'd had experience with injured animals during his childhood on the farming colonies, and while this was clearly a sapient being, some instincts might be similar. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien's ears twitched at the sound, and its eyes tracked Marcus's movement with obvious intelligence. When Marcus knelt beside the diagnostic bed, the alien made an attempt to lift its head, managing only a few inches before exhaustion forced it back down. Marcus's scanner provided more details about the alien's condition: severe malnutrition, dehydration, and, yes, complete paralysis from the mid-spine down. But alive, somehow, after what his ship's computer estimated was at least 3 months since the vessel's life support had failed. The alien should have been dead weeks ago. That's when Marcus noticed the equipment surrounding the diagnostic bed. Crystalline formations pulsed with faint energy, and tubes ran from wall-mounted containers to ports that seemed to have been surgically implanted in the alien's arm. A life support system of some kind, jury-rigged for medical equipment, to keep one being alive while the rest of the ship died. "Somebody really didn't want you to die," Marcus murmured, running his scanner over the improvised setup. The engineering was elegant in its simplicity, using the ship's residual power and automated medical systems to maintain minimal life support for a single individual. But the power cells were nearly depleted, and the nutrient solutions were running low. The alien's eyes fixed on Marcus, and for a moment he felt a strange sensation, as if the being was trying to communicate directly with his mind. Nothing clear enough to call telepathy, but an unmistakable sense of intelligence and desperation. The alien wanted something, needed something, but couldn't voice what that might be. Marcus made a decision that would have violated every salvage regulation in human space. Instead of cataloging the ship's contents and returning later with a full crew, he activated his emergency beacon and called for his ship's medical bay to be prepared for an alien patient. "Lucky strike, this is Marcus. I need an immediate medical extraction. One alien survivor, severe spinal trauma, and malnutrition. Prep the isolation chamber and get the automated surgeon online." The response from his ship's AI was immediate but concerned. "Marcus, regulations require any alien contact to be reported to Colonial Authority before override protocols. Emergency medical situation." Marcus cut in. "We'll sort out the paperwork later." As Marcus prepared a portable life support unit to transport the alien, he noticed something else. The being's breathing had changed, becoming more regular and less labored. Its eyes were brighter, more alert, as if the presence of another living being had given it some measure of hope. The alien's hand moved slightly, fingers that ended in retractable claws, making a gesture that Marcus didn't recognize, but felt might be an attempt at communication. Marcus reached out slowly, letting the alien see his movement, and gently touched the offered hand. The alien's fingers curled around his gloved ones with surprising strength. "I've got you," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure if the alien could understand his words. "You're not alone anymore." The extraction took nearly an hour, carefully moving the alien onto Marcus's portable gurney and ensuring that the improvised life support systems could be transferred to his ship's medical bay. Throughout the process, the alien remained conscious and alert, its eyes following every movement. Occasionally, it would make soft sounds that Marcus's translation software couldn't parse, but the tone suggested gratitude rather than fear. As they left the derelict ship behind, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what had happened to the crew. Had they died in whatever accident had damaged the ship, or had they been forced to abandon it, leaving their injured crewmate behind? The scratch marks around the medical bay door suggested that someone had tried to get in, or perhaps get out. The Lucky Strike's medical bay was state-of-the-art by human standards, though Marcus wasn't sure how well it would adapt to alien physiology. His ship's AI immediately began running diagnostics on their unexpected passenger, its sensors probing and analyzing in ways that would have been invasive for a human patient, but were necessary to understand how to help an alien. Preliminary analysis suggests the patient is of previously unknown species, the AI reported. Physiology shows characteristics of both mammalian and something else I cannot classify. Neural patterns indicate high intelligence, possibly comparable to human levels. The spinal injury appears to be traumatic rather than degenerative. Marcus settled into the medical bay's observation chair, watching as automated systems worked to stabilize his patient. The alien had lost consciousness during the transfer, but its vital signs were improving now that it had access to proper medical care and nutrition. "Can we fix the spinal damage?" Marcus asked. "Unknown. Human spinal repair techniques may not be compatible with this physiology. However, the patient appears to have some form of accelerated healing factor. Given proper care and nutrition, natural recovery may be possible, though the extent is unclear." Marcus nodded, settling in for what he knew would be a long vigil. He'd found many things in his years as a salvager, but never another living being who needed his help. The alien represented a dozen different problems, from legal complications to the simple question of what it ate, but Marcus found he didn't care about any of that. Something about the intelligence in those golden eyes, the trust it had shown despite being helpless, had touched something in Marcus that he hadn't felt in years. Maybe it was the loneliness of deep space work, or maybe it was something more fundamental about human nature, but he was committed now to seeing this through. The alien's hand moved slightly in its sleep, and Marcus reached out to touch it again. This time, he could have sworn he felt a slight pulse of warmth that had nothing to do with body temperature. Whatever this being was, wherever it had come from, it was no longer alone in the universe. And neither was Marcus. As the lucky strike set course for the nearest human outpost, Marcus began to wonder what he'd gotten himself into. But as he watched the steady rise and fall of his patient's breathing, he found he was looking forward to finding out. The stars wheeled by outside the medical bay's viewport, and for the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was doing something that mattered more than just scraping by in the margins of civilization. Whatever happened next, he'd given one being a chance at life. In the darkness between the stars, that felt like enough. The alien's eyes opened briefly, meeting his across the medical bay, and Marcus could have sworn he saw something like gratitude there before sleep claimed the being again. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, and possibly new complications that Marcus couldn't even imagine. But tonight, in the soft hum of life, support systems, and the gentle glow of monitoring equipment, there was peace. Two beings from different worlds, brought together by chance, and bound by the simple act of one refusing to let the other die alone. It was, Marcus thought as he drifted off to sleep in his chair, a very human thing to do. Marcus woke to the soft chime of the medical bay's alert system. 3 days had passed since he brought the alien aboard, and the being had remained unconscious for most of that time, its body working to process the nutrients and medications that the ship's AI had carefully administered. Now, however, the monitoring systems indicated that their patient was not only awake, but showing signs of distress. Marcus rolled out of the chair where he'd been catching what sleep he could between monitoring sessions and immediately saw the problem. The alien was attempting to sit up, its upper body strength apparently unimpaired despite the spinal injury, but the sudden movement had triggered several medical alarms. Golden eyes wide with what Marcus recognized as panic, the being was looking around the unfamiliar environment with the desperate awareness of someone who had awakened in captivity. "Easy," Marcus said, keeping his voice low and moving slowly into the alien's field of view. "You're safe. You're on my ship, the Lucky Strike. I pulled you from that derelict 3 days ago." The alien's gaze fixed on Marcus, and he could see intelligence working behind those eyes, processing information and making connections. The being's breathing slowed slightly, but tension remained in every line of its body. When Marcus moved closer, the alien's lips pulled back to reveal teeth that were clearly designed for tearing meat, though the gesture seemed more defensive than aggressive. "I know you can't understand me," Marcus continued, settling into a chair position where the alien could see him clearly. "But I'm hoping you can at least tell that I'm trying to help." That's when something unexpected happened. The alien's mouth opened, and sounds emerged that were clearly attempts at speech. Not the simple vocalizations Marcus had heard before, but complex patterns of sound that his translation software immediately began trying to parse. The AI speakers crackled to life with fragments of meaning. "Not where Pack Brothers gone." Marcus sat up straighter. The translation was rough and incomplete, but it was definitely communication. The alien was speaking, and more importantly, it was asking questions. "Your Pack Brothers," Marcus said, testing the phrase. "The other crew members? I'm sorry, but you were alone when I found you." The ship had been drifting for months. The alien's expression changed, and Marcus saw something that transcended species boundaries. Grief, loss, and a profound sadness that made his chest tighten. The being understood enough to know that it was alone. Felt them go cold. More words came through the translation system, and Marcus began to understand that the alien possessed some form of empathic ability. It had felt the deaths of its crew, experienced their passing even while paralyzed and unable to help. The scratch marks around the medical bay door suddenly made more sense. The alien had been trying to get out to help its companions, but had been trapped by its own injuries. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and he meant it. "I wish I could have been there sooner." The alien looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus felt that strange sensation again, as if something was touching the edges of his thoughts. Not intrusive, more like someone gently knocking on a door. When he didn't resist the feeling, images began to form in his mind. Not his own memories, but something else. He saw the derelict ship as it had been, alive with activity and purpose. Beings like his patient moved through its corridors with grace and efficiency, their movements suggesting both intelligence and a pack-like social structure. The ship itself was beautiful in its living state, the crystalline formations glowing with power and purpose. Then came the disaster. Something had gone wrong with the ship's exotic matter containment system, causing a cascade failure that had killed most of the crew instantly. Those who survived the initial accident had fought desperately to save the ship, but the damage was too severe. One by one, they had succumbed to radiation exposure and system failures, until only his patient remained, paralyzed by debris, but kept alive by the medical systems that continued to function. The images faded, leaving Marcus with a profound understanding of what the alien had endured. Months of consciousness, unable to move, feeling its pack brothers die, one by one around it, sustained only by automated systems and its own determination to survive. "Your name?" Marcus said suddenly. "What's your name?" The alien's ears perked up at the question, and when it spoke, the word came through clearly. "Kethvar. Was navigator of an M." "Kethvar," Marcus repeated, testing the pronunciation. "I'm Marcus. Marcus Chun." Something changed in the alien's expression at the introduction. A formal recognition, perhaps, or simply relief at being treated as a person rather than a curiosity. Kethvar attempted to raise one hand, managing a gesture that Marcus interpreted as greeting or acknowledgement. Kethvar said, the name strange on alien lips, but recognizable. "You pulled me from the dark." "Yeah, I did," Marcus said. "And now we need to figure out what to do next." That was the question that had been nagging at Marcus for 3 days. Regulations required that any contact with unknown alien species be immediately reported to colonial authority. In practice, that meant Kethvar would become a specimen to be studied, questioned, and eventually returned to whatever remained of Zephyrian space. The fact that the being was paralyzed and the sole survivor of its crew would make it even more valuable to xenobiologists and intelligence analysts. Marcus had delayed making the required reports, telling himself that he needed to stabilize his patient first. But the truth was more complicated. Something about Kethvar, perhaps the intelligence in those golden eyes, or the dignity with which the alien bore its suffering, made the idea of turning him over to authorities feel like betrayal. Your species, Marcus said carefully. Are there others? Family? Government? Kethvar's expression grew distant. Clan home is far. Many star jumps from here. And He gestured weakly at his paralyzed legs. No longer valuable. Burden to clan. There was a matter-of-factness to the statement that suggested Kethvar's culture had harsh views on disability. In many ways, that made Marcus angry. Here was a being of obvious intelligence and capability reduced to considering himself worthless because of an injury. That's bullshit, Marcus said, forgetting that his translation software would render the profanity into whatever Kethvar's language used for similar concepts. Kethvar's ears twitched in what might have been surprise. Bullshit. It means waste, Marcus said, struggling to explain. Wrong. Stupid. You're not worthless because you can't walk. Cannot hunt. Cannot fight. Cannot serve clan, Kethvar replied. But there was less certainty in his voice than before. Can you think? Can you solve problems? Can you navigate a ship through space? Marcus asked, leaning forward. Because from where I'm sitting, those seem like pretty valuable skills. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment, processing this perspective. Marcus got the impression that his patient was encountering ideas that challenged fundamental assumptions about worth and value. Humans think differently? Kethvar asked finally. Some of us do, Marcus said. We got people who can't walk who design starships. People who can't see who compose music that makes grown adults cry. We judge people by what they can do, not what they can't. This led to a longer conversation, with Kethvar asking questions about human society and Marcus doing his best to explain concepts that didn't always translate well. They talked about humanity's history with disability, the technologies developed to assist rather than replace human capability, and the philosophical frameworks that valued contribution over physical perfection. In return, Kethvar shared details about Zephyrian society. His people were pack hunters who had evolved high intelligence and strong empathic bonds, but retained much of their ancestral focus on physical capability and pack hierarchy. The paralyzed were typically euthanized or abandoned, seen as drains on group resources rather than potential contributors. Your pack. Your crew, Marcus said. Did they abandon you? No, Kethvar said quickly, and Marcus felt the strength of his conviction through their growing empathic connection. They fought to save ship until the end. Medical systems set to preserve me. They hoped clan ships would find them, rescue me. But no one came. Ship drifted into dead zone. No navigation signals, no patrols. I felt them give up hope. But they did not abandon. Marcus nodded, understanding. Kethvar's crew had died trying to save their ship and their injured navigator, but space was vast and rescue operations had their limits. The alien had spent months alone not because he was abandoned, but because he was lost. Well, you're not lost anymore, Marcus said. Question is, what do we do now? That question led to a discussion of options, none of them simple. Marcus could deliver Kethvar to colonial authority, which would likely result in the alien being repatriated to Zephyrian space if possible. But given what Kethvar had shared about his culture's views on disability, that might be tantamount to a death sentence. Alternatively, Marcus could apply for refugee status for Kethvar, but that required the alien to demonstrate persecution or inability to return safely to his home territory. The paralysis might qualify, but the process could take years and offered no guarantees. The third option was the one that Marcus found himself considering more seriously despite its complications. He could simply not report the contact, at least not immediately. Keep Kethvar aboard the Lucky Strike while they figured out better alternatives. It would be illegal and could cost Marcus his salvage license, but it would give him time. What do you want to do? Marcus asked finally. If you could choose anything, regardless of what's practical or legal, what would you want? Kethvar was quiet for a long time, his golden eyes fixed on something beyond the medical bay's viewport. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. Want to explore, see new stars, meet new packs, learn human ways of thinking. He paused, then looked directly at Marcus. Want to be useful again. Then, that's what we'll do, Marcus said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. I don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out. Kethvar's expression changed, and Marcus felt a wave of emotion through their connection that was unmistakably gratitude, but also something more complex. Trust, perhaps, or the beginning of what humans might call friendship. You would risk much for stranger, Kethvar observed. Marcus considered that. Why was he willing to upend his life for an alien he'd known for 3 days? Part of it was simple human compassion, the same instinct that made people rescue injured animals or help strangers in distress. But there was more to it than that. Maybe, Marcus said finally, but I don't think you're a stranger anymore. The ship's AI chose that moment to chime in with a status update. Marcus, we're approaching the outer marker buoys for Kepler Station. You need to decide soon whether we're making a scheduled stop or continuing to our final destination. Kepler Station was a major hub for the Outer Rim, with full colonial authority presence and mandatory customs inspections for all arriving vessels. If Marcus docked there with Kethvar aboard, the alien would be discovered immediately. Change course, Marcus said after a moment's hesitation. Set heading for the Helix Nebula survey stations. We'll resupply at Freeport. Freeport was exactly what its name suggested, a loosely regulated trading station that asked few questions and offered even fewer services to law enforcement. It would give them time to plan their next move without immediate discovery. Course correction acknowledged. The AI responded. Estimated arrival at Freeport, 4 days, 7 hours. Kethvar had been following the conversation with obvious interest. You choose difficult path for my sake. I choose the right path, Marcus corrected. Sometimes those are the same thing. That evening, as the Lucky Strike cruised through hyperspace toward their new destination, Marcus and Kethvar continued their conversations about their respective species and cultures. The alien's English was improving rapidly, and Marcus suspected that the empathic connection was helping with more than just emotional understanding. Your pack brothers, Kethvar said during one of their talks. Tell me of them. Marcus had to think about that. He'd been alone for so long that the concept of pack brotherhood felt foreign. I don't really have pack brothers, he said finally. Humans don't always work that way. All alone. Kethvar seemed genuinely distressed by this concept. How do you survive? Find meaning. We make our own meaning, I guess, Marcus said. Some humans have families, others have friends or colleagues. Some of us choose to be alone. You chose alone? Marcus considered the question. Had he chosen solitude, or had it chosen him? His ex-wife would probably say he'd driven people away with his stubborn independence and inability to compromise. His former business partners might point to his tendency to disappear into deep space for months at a time. Maybe they were all right. I thought I did, Marcus said. But maybe I was just waiting for the right pack brother to come along. The conversation moved to other topics, but Marcus found himself thinking about what he'd said. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone aboard his ship. For the first time in even longer, he was looking forward to tomorrow's conversations and discoveries. As Kethvar drifted off to sleep, Marcus settled into his observation chair and watched the stars streak past in hyperspace. He made a decision that would change both their lives, and he still wasn't entirely sure why. But sitting there in the soft glow of the medical bay, listening to the steady breathing of another living being, Marcus found he didn't regret it. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. For a human who had chosen solitude, it was a surprisingly comforting thought. Freeport Station sprawled across 3 kilometers of asteroid-mounted infrastructure, a chaotic maze of docking bays, trading halls, and residential modules that had grown organically over decades without central planning. The station's unofficial motto was "Credits talk, questions walk," which made it exactly the kind of place where a human salvager and his alien companion could blend into the background while figuring out their next move. Marcus had managed to dock at a remote bay on the station's industrial side, where cargo haulers and independent operators paid premium rates for privacy and minimal oversight. The Lucky Strike settled into its berth with barely a registration ping from station control, and Marcus found himself breathing easier for the first time in days. "We're here," he told Kethvar, who had insisted on watching the docking procedure from the bridge despite the difficulty of transferring his mobility. The alien's upper body strength was remarkable, but navigating ship corridors without the use of his legs required careful planning and assistance. Many ships, Kethvar observed, studying the displays that showed Freeport's bustling traffic patterns. Many species is normal for human space. Not really, Marcus admitted. Most human stations are more organized. Freeport is special because it's independent. The local government runs things, not colonial authority. Over the past 4 days, Marcus had been researching options for Kethvar's situation, and what he'd learned wasn't encouraging. Colonial authority had strict protocols for contact with unknown alien species, protocols that assumed such contact would occur through official diplomatic channels. An individual human discovering a survivor from a previously unknown species created legal complications that could take years to resolve. Worse, the sections of Zephyrian space that Marcus could identify from Kethvar's descriptions were currently experiencing political upheaval. Several clan territories were at war, and refugees were being turned away from neighboring systems. Even if Kethvar wanted to return home, it might not be possible. "What do we do here?" Kethvar asked, interrupting Marcus's worried thoughts. "First, we find you some mobility assistance," Marcus said. "Human technology might not be perfect for your physiology, but it's better than being chair-bound. Then, we figure out how to make you legally invisible." That last part was the tricky bit. Freeport's relaxed attitude toward documentation was helpful, but Kethvar would eventually need identity papers that would allow him to travel and work legally. Creating such papers for a member of an unrecognized species would require creativity and probably some expensive favors. Marcus had contacted an old friend who specialized in exactly those kinds of problems. They found Zara Okafor in her usual booth at the Cosmic Cantina, a bar that served as neutral ground for traders, smugglers, and other individuals who preferred to conduct business away from official oversight. Zara was a small woman with intricate tattoos that shifted color in the dim lighting, and she possessed the kind of smile that suggested she knew everyone's secrets and wasn't above using them. "Marcus Chun," she said as they approached, her eyes immediately fixing on Kethvar. "You always did have a talent for finding interesting salvage." "He's not salvage," Marcus said, perhaps more sharply than necessary. "He's a person who needs help." "Relax, Marcus. It's a figure of speech." Zara's expression softened as she studied Kethvar more carefully. "Though I have to say, this is the first time you've brought me a problem that can talk back." Kethvar had insisted on coming to the meeting despite the risks, arguing that any decisions about his future should involve his input. Marcus had agreed, but now he was regretting the decision. Even in Freeport's anything-goes atmosphere, a paralyzed alien wolfman tended to attract attention. "Zara Okafor," Marcus said, making introductions. "This is Kethvar. Kethvar, this is the woman who's going to help us navigate the bureaucracy." Zara extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting, which Kethvar managed to return despite his awkward position in the mobility chair they'd borrowed from the station's medical center. The handshake lasted a moment longer than necessary, and Marcus noticed that Zara's eyes widened slightly. "Empathic?" she asked. "Strong empathic abilities," Marcus confirmed. "Among other things." "Interesting." Zara leaned back in her booth, studying both of them. "So what exactly are we dealing with here? Unknown species? Refugee situation? Or something more complicated?" Marcus explained the situation as briefly as possible, leaving out some details about the empathic connection he'd been developing with Kethvar, but covering the essential points about the rescue, the legal complications, and Kethvar's desire to remain in human space rather than return to his own people. The paralysis complicates things, Zara said when Marcus finished. But it might also help. Disability refugee status is one of the few categories that colonial authority processes quickly, especially if we can demonstrate that his home culture would treat him poorly. My clan would not mistreat, Kethvar interjected, his English still careful, but increasingly confident. But would consider me burden, dead weight on pack resources. That's mistreatment by human standards, Zara said firmly. The trick is documenting it properly. We'll need testimony from cultural experts, medical evaluations, and a formal petition for protective status. How long would that take? Marcus asked. Officially? 6 to 18 months. Unofficially? Zara's smile turned predatory. I know a judge who owes me favors, and a colonial authority administrator who likes expensive whiskey. We could have temporary status approved in weeks, permanent papers in months. The conversation continued for another hour, with Zara outlining the process for establishing Kethvar's legal identity and Marcus learning just how expensive creating a new person could be. By the time they finished, Marcus's savings account was considerably lighter, but Kethvar would have legitimate documentation within a month. One more thing, Zara said as they prepared to leave. He'll need a profession. Something he can do from a mobility chair that won't raise questions about his species or background. Marcus had been thinking about that problem since leaving Kepler Station. Kethvar was clearly intelligent and had extensive experience with navigation and ship systems, but most technical positions required certification and training that would be difficult to obtain discreetly. Navigation consulting, Marcus said suddenly. Independent contractors who help ships plot courses through difficult space. It's freelance work, no formal certification required, and most communication is done remotely anyway. Could work, Zara agreed, especially if he specializes in areas that human navigators find challenging. What about the exotic matter corridors in the Helix Nebula? I hear those are nearly impossible to navigate safely. Kethvar's ears perked up with interest. Helix navigation requires intuitive understanding of space-time distortions. Most species cannot develop such understanding. But, Zephyrians, we feel the currents. Perfect, Zara said. A disabled alien navigator with unique abilities that human ships need. It's exactly the kind of specialty that makes the bureaucracy happy to grant work permits. As they left the cosmic cantina, Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The legal problems weren't solved yet, but they had a plan and someone competent to execute it. More importantly, Kethvar would have a chance to build a new life, doing something meaningful rather than being warehoused as a curiosity or sent back to a culture that had no place for him. The next few days fell into a routine. Marcus handled the legal paperwork and documentation requirements, while Kethvar worked with Freeport's medical center to develop better mobility solutions. The station's chief medical officer, a gruff Martian named Dr. Sarah Kim, had taken a professional interest in adapting human prosthetics for alien physiology. The muscle attachment points are completely different, Dr. Kim explained during one of their sessions, gesturing at holographic displays showing Kethvar's spinal structure. But the neural interfaces should be compatible with minor modifications. The prosthetics wouldn't restore full mobility, but they would give Kethvar some independence and the ability to navigate ship environments more easily. More importantly, the work was teaching both human and alien medical professionals new techniques that could help others in similar situations. Marcus found himself spending more time than necessary in the medical center, ostensibly to help with communication issues, but really because he enjoyed watching Kethvar engage with the technical challenges. The alien's analytical mind and different perspective on spatial relationships provided insights that human engineers hadn't considered. He's remarkable, Dr. Kim told Marcus during one of their breaks. The way he processes three-dimensional navigation problems is unlike anything I've seen. if we could figure out how to replicate that ability in humans. You can't, Marcus said with certainty he couldn't explain. It's not just intelligence. There's something else, something that requires the empathic abilities. Dr. Kim looked at him curiously. You sound like you speak from experience. Marcus realized that he did. Over the past week, his connection with Kethvar had grown stronger and more complex. He found himself occasionally aware of the alien's emotions and perspectives, and sometimes Kethvar seemed to respond to thoughts that Marcus hadn't voiced. It wasn't true telepathy, more like an emotional resonance that allowed them to understand each other in ways that went beyond language. Maybe I do, Marcus said. That evening, as they worked together on navigation charts for the Helix Nebula routes that would form the basis of Kethvar's new profession, Marcus brought up the subject that had been nagging at him for days. The empathic connection, he said carefully. Is it normal for your species? Kethvar paused in his work, considering the question. Normal with pack brothers, yes. But you're a different species. Should not be possible. But it is possible. Yes. And growing stronger. Kethvar looked at Marcus directly. Does this concern you? Marcus thought about that. The connection was certainly unprecedented in human experience, and there were potential implications that neither of them fully understood. But when he examined his feelings about the situation, concern wasn't what he found. No, he said finally. It doesn't concern me. It feels right. Natural. Good, Kethvar said with what Marcus had learned to recognize as his equivalent of a smile. Because for my people, such bonds are sacred, not easily broken. I wouldn't want to break it, Marcus said, and realized he meant it completely. Their work that evening was particularly productive, with Kethvar's intuitive understanding of exotic matter flows allowing him to map navigation routes that human computers had marked as impossible. When they finally finished, they had enough material to establish Kethvar's reputation as a specialist in the most challenging areas of space navigation. Tomorrow we start building your client base, Marcus said as they prepared for sleep. Dr. Kim says the prosthetics will be ready for testing in a few days, and Zara thinks your temporary documentation will be approved by next week. And you? Kethvar asked. What will you do when I am independent? Marcus had been avoiding that question, but now he found himself answering without hesitation. I thought I'd stick around, if that's all right with you. Turns out I'm pretty good at this part of business. The relief and happiness that flowed through their connection was answer enough, but Kethvar spoke anyway. Would be honored to have you as pack brother. As Marcus settled into his bunk that night, he reflected on how much his life had changed in less than 2 weeks. He'd set out to salvage valuable technology from a derelict ship and instead found something far more precious. Purpose, companionship, and the first real sense of belonging he'd felt in years. More than that, he discovered that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their adaptability, but their capacity to see value in others that those beings might not see in themselves. Kethvar would never be the hunter-warrior that Zephyrian culture prized, but he was becoming something new and valuable. A bridge between species, a navigator of impossible spaces, and a living example of what was possible when different forms of intelligence worked together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they established Kethvar's identity and began building his reputation as an independent navigator. But tonight, listening to the steady breathing of his pack brother in the next cabin, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt like he was home. 3 months after that first meeting in the Cosmic Cantina, Kethvar had become something of a legend among independent ship captains working the Outer Rim routes. His reputation for navigating impossible passages had spread through the informal networks that connected traders, explorers, and others who operated in the galaxy's most challenging regions. The Lucky Strike received navigation requests faster than they could process them, and Marcus found himself turning down work for the first time in his career. Another request from the Titan Syndicate, Marcus announced, reading from his communication console as they sat in the ship's common area. They want you to plot a course through the shimmering deeps. Apparently, their usual navigator got lost in their last month, and they're still looking for him. Kethvar looked up from the three-dimensional holographic display, where he was working on a particularly complex routing problem for a science expedition. The prosthetics Dr. Kim had designed allowed him to manipulate the controls with surprising dexterity, and his enhanced mobility meant he could work for hours without the fatigue that had plagued his earlier efforts. Shimmering deeps, Kethvar repeated thoughtfully. Quantum storm region. Very dangerous for ships without proper navigation. Many crews lost there over the years. That's why they're willing to pay premium rates. Marcus said. 50,000 credits for a safe passage route. We do it, Kethvar decided. But we'll require survey mission first. Cannot plot safe course without understanding current storm patterns. This had become their standard operating procedure for the most challenging navigation requests. Kethvar would identify the specific hazards and information gaps. Marcus would plan a survey mission using the Lucky Strike's advanced sensors, and together they would develop navigation solutions that other teams couldn't match. What made their partnership particularly effective was the way their different abilities complemented each other. Marcus brought human technological expertise and systematic problem-solving approaches, while Kethvar contributed empathic sensitivity to space-time distortions and an intuitive understanding of how exotic matter behaved in different conditions. The combination allowed them to tackle navigation challenges that had stymied much larger and better-funded teams. Speaking of challenging assignments, Marcus said, "We got a message from someone who claims to represent the Colonial Scientific Survey. They want to discuss a classified project." Kethvar's ears perked up with interest. Government work? Apparently. They're being very mysterious about it, but the preliminary offer is substantial enough to suggest they're serious. Marcus had mixed feelings about working with Colonial Authority, given the legal complications that might arise if anyone examined Kethvar's documentation too closely. But Zara's paperwork had held up to several background checks, and Kethvar's reputation as a navigation specialist was now established enough that his alien nature was seen as an advantage rather than a problem. The meeting was scheduled for the next day at a neutral location on Kepler Station, the same hub that Marcus had avoided 3 months earlier. Now, with proper documentation and a legitimate business operation, they could dock there without concern. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the CSS representative, met them in a private conference room that Marcus suspected was routinely swept for surveillance devices. She was a tall woman with premature gray hair and the kind of intense focus that Marcus associated with people who dealt with classified information for a living. "Gentlemen," she said as they settled into chairs around the conference table, "thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I should start by saying that this conversation is covered by several layers of security classification, and you'll need to sign non-disclosure agreements before we can proceed." Marcus and Kethvar exchanged glances. Government work always involved paperwork, but the level of secrecy suggested this was something more significant than routine navigation consulting. "What kind of project are we talking about?" Marcus asked. "The short version is that we've discovered something in the galactic core region that requires investigation, but conventional navigation techniques can't get us there safely. The space around the galactic center is filled with exotic matter storms, quantum distortions, and gravitational anomalies that make standard FDL travel impossible." Kethvar leaned forward with obvious interest. "Core region navigation, extremely dangerous. Many expeditions lost over centuries. What makes you think we can succeed where others failed?" Dr. Warren smiled for the first time since the meeting began. "Because we've been following your work, Mr. Kethvar. The routes you've mapped through the Helix Nebula and the quantum maze demonstrate capabilities that our best human navigators can't replicate. We think your unique abilities might be the key to reaching our destination safely." She activated a holographic projector, filling the air above the table with a three-dimensional map of the galactic core region. Red zones marked areas of known hazards, while yellow regions indicated uncertain conditions. The vast majority of the map was red. "The target is here," Dr. Warren continued, highlighting a point deep within the core region. "Our long-range sensors have detected artificial structures of unknown origin, possibly predating any known galactic civilization. The discovery has significant implications for our understanding of galactic history and possibly the development of new technologies. Marcus studied the map, noting the scale of the journey and the distances involved. This would require months of travel, possibly more than a year-round trip, and that's assuming we can actually reach the destination. The CSS is prepared to fund a 2-year mission with full compensation for risks and exclusivity of discoveries, DR. Warren said, "We're talking about a contract worth several million credits, plus potential bonuses based on mission success." It was more money than Marcus had seen in his entire career, enough to set them up for life if they chose to retire after the mission. But the risks were enormous, and the challenges would test their abilities beyond anything they'd attempted before. "We need time to consider the proposal," Marcus said finally, "and we'll need full access to all available data about the target region and previous exploration attempts." "Of course," Dr. Warren agreed. "Take all the time you need, but please understand that this project has the highest priority within the CSS. We're hoping to launch within 6 months." After Dr. Warren left, Marcus and Kethvar remained in the conference room, studying the holographic display and discussing the implications of what they'd just heard. "It's impossible," Marcus said eventually. "The hazard levels in those regions are off the charts. Even with your abilities, the margin for error is practically non-existent." "It's challenging," Kethvar agreed, "but not impossible. My people have legends, stories of navigators who could guide ships through the core storms. Always thought they were myths. And now?" Kethvar was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes fixed on the swirling patterns of hazardous space displayed in the hologram. "Now, I think perhaps myths contain truth. Perhaps some navigators really could feel the deep currents that flow through galaxies' heart. Can you feel them? Not from here. But in meditation, sometimes I sense something vast and distant, like ocean currents, but made of space-time itself." Marcus had learned to trust Kethvar's instincts about spatial phenomena, but this seemed beyond even his enhanced abilities. The galactic core region was a maelstrom of exotic matter and gravitational distortions that had defeated every exploration attempt in recorded history. "Even if we could navigate there," Marcus said, "what about the return journey? If something goes wrong with the ship systems, we'd be stranded in the most hostile environment in the galaxy." "This is why they need us," Kethvar replied. "Because conventional approaches have failed. They need a navigator who can improvise, find paths that do not exist on charts." Over the next several days, they pored over the classified data that Dr. Warren had provided. The picture that emerged was both fascinating and terrifying. The target region contained structures that appeared to be artificial, but show design principles unlike anything in the known galactic database. Spectroscopic analysis suggested materials and energy signatures that didn't match any current understanding of physics or engineering. More disturbing were the records of previous exploration attempts. Over the past century, 17 expeditions had attempted to reach the galactic core region using various approaches. None had returned. "They're asking us to do something that's gotten everyone else killed," Marcus observed during one of their planning sessions. "Yes," Kethvar agreed, "but they're also offering us chance to discover something that could change everything. New technologies, new understanding of the universe itself. And if we don't make it back," Kethvar looked at him seriously, "then we die together, doing something worthy. For Pack Brothers is good death." Marcus found himself thinking about that conversation over the next few days as they continued their research and planning. The rational part of his mind argued that the mission was essentially suicide, that no amount of money was worth the risks involved. But another part of him, the part that had always been drawn to the unknown regions beyond civilization's edge, whispered that this might be the discovery of the century. More than that, Marcus realized that he trusted Kethvar's judgment about spatial navigation more than he trusted his own fears. The alien had guided them safely through passages that human navigators considered impossible, had developed an intuitive understanding of exotic space phenomena that bordered on precognitive. If Kethvar thought the mission was possible, then maybe it was. "We're going to do it," Marcus said finally, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Kethvar's ears perked up, and Marcus felt a surge of excitement and determination through their connection. "You are certain?" "No," Marcus admitted, "but I'm willing to try. We'll need to modify the Lucky Strike extensively, develop new navigation protocols, and probably invent some new technology along the way. But if anyone can pull this off, it's us." The next several weeks were a whirlwind of preparation and planning. The CSS provided unlimited funding for ship modifications, equipment upgrades, and crew expansion. They added Dr. Kim to their team as chief medical officer and recruited 2 additional engineers who specialized in exotic matter containment systems. Most importantly, they spent time developing new techniques that combined human technology with Kethvar's empathic navigation abilities. Working with CSS scientists, they created a neural interface system that would allow Kethvar to directly sense and interpret the ship's navigation data, potentially allowing him to detect hazards and safe passages that conventional sensors couldn't identify. "This is completely experimental," Dr. Kim warned as they tested the neural interface for the first time. "We have no idea what the long-term effects might be. Without it, mission fails," Kethvar said simply. "Risk is acceptable." The first test was both exhilarating and terrifying. With the neural interface active, Kethvar could sense the Lucky Strike's position in space with unprecedented precision, feeling gravitational currents and exotic matter flows as if they were physical sensations. More importantly, he could project his awareness beyond the ship's immediate vicinity, sensing hazards and safe passages at distances that conventional sensors couldn't reach. "It's like having a map of invisible roads," Kethvar explained after the first successful test. "Paths through space that exist, but cannot be seen with normal vision." With the neural interface technology proven, Dr. Warren approved their mission plan and scheduled departure for the following month. The Lucky Strike would launch with a full crew of 6, carrying enough supplies for 2 years in deep space, and the most advanced navigation equipment that human science could provide. As Marcus made final preparations for what might be the last mission of his career, he reflected on how much his life had changed since that day he'd discovered a paralyzed alien on a derelict ship. He'd started as a solitary salvager, scraping by on the margins of civilization, and now he was preparing to lead humanity's first successful expedition to the galactic core. But the most important change wasn't professional. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus felt like he belonged somewhere, was part of something larger than himself. The empathic bond with Kethvar had grown into a partnership that transcended species differences, and their small crew had become the kind of close-knit team that Marcus had never thought he could be part of. "Ready for tomorrow?" Kethvar asked as they conducted final system checks on the bridge. Marcus looked around at the displays showing their modified ship systems, their enhanced navigation equipment, and their planned route through the most dangerous region of the galaxy. By any rational measure, they were about to attempt the impossible. "As ready as we're ever going to be," Marcus said. "Let's go make history." The stars awaited, and for the first time in his life, Marcus felt truly prepared to meet whatever they might find among them. The approach to the galactic core took 8 months of careful navigation through increasingly hostile space. What had started as routine hyperspace jumps gradually became something more akin to threading needles in a cosmic storm. Kethvar spent most of his time connected to the neural interface, his consciousness extending beyond the ship to feel for safe passages through space-time distortions that could tear apart matter at the molecular level. "Another gravity, well, cluster ahead," Kethvar announced, his voice slightly distorted by the neural interface's effects. "Large one. We'll need to dance around the edges." Marcus watched the navigation displays as Kethvar guided their modified ship through a region where several collapsed stars had created a maze of gravitational anomalies. The Lucky Strike responded to corrections so subtle that human instruments couldn't detect them, following paths that existed only in Kethvar's enhanced perception. Dr. Kim monitored Kethvar's vital signs from her position at the medical console, her expression showing the concern she'd been expressing for weeks about the strain the constant neural interface use was putting on her navigator. Heart rate elevated, neural activity showing unusual patterns, she reported. Kethvar, you need to take a break soon. Cannot, Kethvar replied without opening his eyes. Safe harbor still 12 hours distant. Must maintain course corrections or ship will be lost. This had become the pattern for the past month as they approached the galactic core. The spatial distortions were now so severe that conventional navigation was impossible, requiring Kethvar to remain connected to the ship's sensors for days at a time. The strain was enormous, but any interruption in his guidance could mean disaster. Marcus found himself sharing some of that strain through their empathic connection. He could feel Kethvar's exhaustion and the way the alien's consciousness was stretched thin by the constant demands of navigation. But he could also sense something else: excitement, wonder, and a growing certainty that they were approaching something extraordinary. Target region coming into sensor range, announced Dr. Sarah Mills, their chief science officer. Preliminary scans are unusual. Marcus moved to the science station, studying the data as it came in. The structures they'd been sent to investigate were massive, easily the size of small moons, but they showed none of the characteristics of natural formation. The geometric patterns were too precise, the materials too uniform, and the energy signatures suggested technologies that operated on principles human science didn't recognize. Age estimates? Marcus asked. Preliminary dating suggests minimum 5 million years, Dr. Mills replied. Possibly much older. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Kethvar's eyes opened for the first time in hours, and Marcus felt a surge of recognition through their connection. The alien was staring at the displays with an expression of wonder mixed with something that might have been ancestral memory. I know this place, Kethvar said quietly. Not personally, but racial memory. Deep stories passed down through generations. Your people have been here before? Marcus asked. Not my people directly, but the first navigators. The legends speak of those who could walk between stars, who built roads through the deep currents of space-time itself. Kethvar paused, his golden eyes fixed on the ancient structures. They called this place the Heart of Stars. The next several hours were devoted to detailed scans and careful approach procedures. The structures appeared to be some kind of space station or facility, built from materials that showed no signs of deterioration despite their incredible age. More intriguingly, they were still active, generating energy fields and sending out signals and patterns that suggested ongoing operation. Life signs? Marcus asked as they reached optimal scanning range. Negative on biological life, Dr. Mills reported. But there are definite signs of artificial intelligence activity. Multiple systems appear to be operational and responding to our presence. As if summoned by her words, their communication system activated with an incoming signal. The message came through in a language that their computers couldn't translate, but the patterns were clearly artificial rather than natural. Kethvar listened to the signal for several minutes, his expression growing increasingly amazed. It's ancient Zephyrian, not the modern language, but the original form used by the first navigators. I can understand parts of it. What's it saying? Marcus asked. Welcome, something about long journey, and recognition of pack bond. Kethvar lukid konfessiv. The translation is difficult, but it seems to be greeting us specifically, not just any visitors. The signal repeated several times, with variations that suggested the source was attempting to improve communication. Eventually, English words began appearing in the transmission, as if the ancient intelligence was learning their language in real time. Greetings, descendants of the first navigators, and their human pack brothers, came a voice that seemed to emerge from the ship's communication system itself. We have awaited your arrival for longer than stars have burned. Marcus and his crew exchanged amazed glances. The intelligence they were communicating with was not only ancient beyond human comprehension, but it had somehow been expecting them specifically. Greetings, Marcus replied, not sure of the proper protocol for contacting prehistoric artificial intelligence. We're explorers from human space, investigating the structures in this region. You are more than explorers, the voice replied. You are the fulfillment of a prediction made by the first navigators before they transcended physical existence. They foresaw that their descendants would one day return, joined in pack bond with a species of remarkable adaptability and compassion. Kethvar leaned forward, his entire attention focused on the conversation. The first navigators, what happened to them? They evolved beyond the need for physical form, becoming one with the deep currents of space-time they had learned to navigate. But before transcending, they built this facility as a gift for their descendants, a repository of knowledge and technology to be claimed when the time was right. The implications were staggering. Marcus found himself looking at Kethvar with new understanding. The aliens' navigation abilities weren't just enhanced senses, but a genetic inheritance from beings who had mastered space-time manipulation millions of years ago. Why now? Dr. Kim asked from her medical station. Why did they predict this specific time? Because this is when their descendants would be ready, the intelligence replied. The first navigators understood that true mastery of space-time required not just technical knowledge, but the emotional wisdom that comes from deep connection with other forms of consciousness. They predicted that their descendants would need to form pack bonds with beings who possessed qualities they themselves lacked. Marcus felt the truth of that statement through his connection with Kethvar. The aliens' navigation abilities had grown stronger and more precise as their partnership deepened, as if the empathic bond was somehow necessary for the full expression of his inherited talents. Human qualities, Marcus said, beginning to understand. Adaptability, technological innovation, willingness to help others regardless of species. Precisely. The first navigators were powerful, but limited by their focus on hierarchy and physical capability. They foresaw that their descendants would need the partnership of beings who valued cooperation over dominance, who could see potential where others saw only limitation. Over the next several days, the ancient intelligence guided them through the station's vast archives, sharing technologies and knowledge that had been waiting millions of years for the right recipients. They learned techniques for space-time navigation that made their current abilities seem primitive, methods for healing that could repair nerve damage thought to be permanent, and insights into the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. Most importantly, they discovered that Kethvar's paralysis could be completely cured using first navigator medical technology. The ancient machines could regenerate spinal tissue and restore full mobility without any of the complications that human medicine couldn't solve. The choice is yours, the intelligence explained as they stood before a crystalline medical chamber. The healing process will also enhance your natural abilities, allowing you to navigate not just space-time, but other dimensions of existence. However, the process cannot be reversed. Kethvar looked at the chamber for a long time, then at Marcus. Through their connection, Marcus could feel his friend's conflict. The alien had adapted to his disability, had found purpose and meaning despite it, and had built a life that didn't depend on physical perfection. What do you want to do? Marcus asked quietly. Want to experience universe as my ancestors did, Kethvar replied. But also want to remain connected to Pack Brother who helped me discover what was truly valuable about myself. The intelligence seemed to sense their concern. The pack bond you have formed transcends physical form. Indeed, the healing process may strengthen it, allowing both of you to share in enhanced abilities. Marcus felt a chill of anticipation mixed with fear. The intelligence was suggesting that the healing process might affect him as well, changing him in ways he couldn't predict or understand. We do this together, Marcus said finally. Whatever happens, we face it as pack brothers. The healing process took 3 days, with both Marcus and Kethvar unconscious for most of that time. When they finally awakened, the changes were immediately apparent. Kethvar's legs moved normally for the first time since Marcus had known him. But more than that, both of them could sense things that had been invisible before. Marcus could feel the gravitational currents that flowed through space, could sense the emotional states of his crew members, and could perceive dimensions of existence that human science had never suspected. Kethvar's abilities had expanded beyond navigation to include what could only be described as limited precognition, the ability to sense potential futures and choose paths that led to desired outcomes. The first navigator's final gift, the intelligence, explained. The ability to explore not just physical space, but the infinite dimensions of possibility itself. As they prepared to leave the heart of stars, their ship's cargo holds filled with technologies that would revolutionize human understanding of the universe. Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. He'd started as a salvager who rescued an injured alien and had ended up as something unprecedented in human history, the first member of his species to form a true pact bond with another intelligent race. But more than that, he'd learned something about humanity's place in the galaxy. They weren't the most advanced species, or the strongest, or the oldest. What made humans special was their capacity to see value in others that those beings might not see in themselves, to form connections that transcended species boundaries, and to adapt and grow through cooperation rather than domination. Ready to go home? Kethvar asked as they took their positions on the bridge for departure. Marcus looked around at his crew, all of them changed by their experiences at the Galactic Core, all of them carrying knowledge that would benefit countless others. Then, he looked at Kethvar, his pack brother and partner in the most extraordinary adventure of their lives. Ready, Marcus said. Let's show the galaxy what we've learned. The journey back to human space would take months, but with their enhanced abilities and the technologies they'd acquired, it would be far easier than the approach had been. More importantly, they would return as living proof that the greatest discoveries came not from conquering the unknown, but from forming connections with other forms of consciousness and learning to see the universe through different eyes. As the Lucky Strike departed the heart of stars and began its journey through the cosmic maelstrom of the Galactic Core, Marcus felt a deep satisfaction. They'd started this mission as explorers seeking ancient technology, but they were returning as something more, ambassadors of a new kind of partnership between species, carriers of wisdom that could help both humanity and the Zephyrians evolve into something greater than either could achieve alone. In the end, that was perhaps the most human thing of all, the refusal to see others as competition or obstacles, but as potential partners in the endless journey of discovery that stretched across the stars. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but it was also full of beings who could share in those wonders if only someone was willing to extend a hand in friendship. Marcus had learned that lesson from a paralyzed alien on a derelict ship, and now he would spend the rest of his life teaching it to others. It was, he thought as the stars streamed past their enhanced ship, a very good way to live.